Okay, we are live. I just want to wait maybe 30 seconds for probably other people who would like to join this live streaming. For those who don't know me, my name is Kevork Almassian. I'm the founder of Syriana Analysis. I'm Syrian of Armenian origins. I consider myself a political commentator, independent political commentator. I'm based in Germany and I post videos, commentary videos on different geopolitical issues. I have studied international relations and diplomacy and also political science and also European affairs in Paris. So I have a clue about what's going on around the world. I'm not part of the mainstream media. I have created this channel in order to shed light on different topics, especially geopolitical conflicts around the world, from a different perspective, because I believe the truth is not black and white. And unfortunately, when we follow the mainstream media, we will always get the impression that it's the good against the evil. When there are wars, in my opinion, most sides commit crimes and there are no saints in politics. And there is no saint politician. Before I answer to your questions, I want actually to wrap up what happened in 2022. I think this year was very spectacular, important, and we haven't seen such climate in on international relations since the Cold War. I will start with Syria because I created this channel to cover the Syrian war and what's happening there, and the fame of Syrian analysis was thanks to the coverage of the Syrian war. On the military level, not so much happened in Syria in this last year for a very simple reason because the major acts of hostilities between all sides have stopped. The Syrian army crushed the so called rebels, who are mostly Islamists and Islamist terrorists, starting from the Free Syrian Army, the Jabhat al-Nusra, ISIS, Ahrar al-Sham, Jaish al-Islam, etc. There were tens of them in the past decade, and the Syrian army managed to crush these terrorist groups thanks to also the support of the allies, namely Iran and Russia, and politically also China. And at the moment, the so-called rebels are in northern Aleppo, in especially on the borders with Turkey, in Idlib, and some of them are on the borders with Iraq, on Al Tanaf border crossing, where the Americans have military base there. And on the eastern side of Syria, you have the Kurdish militias, also protected by the American bases, who occupy like one third of the Syrian territory there, and they steal the Syrian oil, the wheat, and the lots of products that Syria can, or let's say natural resources that Syria can extract from that area, which is unfortunately now is not possible. The on a political level, there was, in my opinion, one major change. The Turkish rhetoric towards Syria has changed. Erdogan has moved from "we want Assad to go" or "Assad's days are numbered," and he asked several times for his removal, and he supported the terrorist groups in Syria from Al Qaeda, ISIS, and many other organizations in order to remove Assad from power. It was a long overdue, I would say, long journey for him, at least one decade after being in good terms with Assad. But the war has changed his priorities, and now he's also again changing his rhetoric once again. And he says that he's ready to meet with Assad and he wants to strike a deal with Assad. But from the Syrian perspective, in Syria, they know that the project of the regime change war that the Americans or the CIA has assigned to different regional countries in the region, such as Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, has failed. So now Turkey wants to open relations again with Syria because they need Syria for two major reasons. One, They want to return the refugees from Turkey to Syria, and I think there are over 3.5 million refugees there. So at least 1 million refugee should be returned from the Turkish perspective to Syria. And the second is the Kurdish militias who occupy some border crossings and some parts of northern Syria, and Turkey considers them security threat. So Erdogan wants to cooperate with Syria in these two topics. However, from the Syrian side, they are very clear. They don't mind reopening ties with um, Ankara. However, there should be a clear schedule when the Turkish occupation forces will withdraw from Syria and how the security situation will be solved in Idlib, especially that Turkey protects these terrorist organizations in Idlib. And Turkey still insists that these groups probably should have a say in Syria or certain influence or be part of the government. So, from the Damascus point of view, this is impossible. So, we don't know how they're going to solve it. The mediator is Russia, and Russia is also lobbying, and they are asking Damascus to sit on the same table with Turkey, but Damascus refuses up until this moment to sit directly or publicly, let's say, to speak about security issues unless Turkey commits itself to withdraw from Syria and also put a schedule, clear timetable to withdraw from Syria and also disarm the jihadists. On the eastern side, the Kurdish militias, they are again in trouble because Turkey again threatening to invade certain parts of the northern part of Syria. And unfortunately, the Kurdish militias think that the Americans will protect them, even though the Americans say themselves, including the former ambassador to Syria, American ambassador to Syria, that the Kurds shouldn't really rely on the Americans because the Americans do not have a strategy in Syria. They don't have a long-term strategy. Like they don't know up until when they're gonna stay there, and how can they benefit from their stay, because staying in Syria they could stay for decades, but if they're not benefiting from it, they don't have a long-term vision about it. And what the Americans are basically doing in Syria is just keep the conflict the way it is, just freeze the conflict, impose more sanctions, deteriorate the situation in Syria on the economic level, on the social level, but they're not getting any benefits from it, because they were betting that if they impose harsh sanctions, the people will starve and they will rise against the government. It's true that the government lost part of its popularity or support because of these sanctions, because the government isn't able to provide the basic necessities for the people. However, the people do not also want to remove the government because they know the alternative is the Islamist groups, and they know that the Americans are doing this in order to create a situation that the people would rise against the government. And they have learned some lessons in the past decade. They have learned from Iraq, from Libya, and also themselves in Syria, right? So these were the main issues that happened in Syria. I think the um, the channels will be opened with Turkey sooner or later. We don't know when exactly, but it could be next year because Erdogan wants to finish this rapprochement with Syria as quick as possible, because there is election next year in Turkey, and he would like at least to promise his people that he will return at least 1 million refugees to Syria, which will partially fix the economic pressure in their country, and also the presence of the Kurdish militias with the Assad government. Because if you watch the Turkish media nowadays, you will see that all the political parties there, they have the same almost promise that they want to open diplomatic relations with Syria in order to solve these important issues for them. What happened in Iran? Now, Iran is another very important country in the Middle East, and I think it's a huge, big regional player. The current turmoil in Iran, in my opinion, is not innocent. First things first, I am completely and totally with women rights, and I believe there shouldn't be any dress code, strict dress code, or any type of discrimination against women. I think men and women should be equal in front of the law, and I think nobody should force them to wear anything like a veil or something. This is my opinion. However, I also believe that the current protests in Syria, in Iran, looks very much similar to what happened in Syria in 2011, and especially in regards to um, violence, burning public properties, and also killing security officers, etc. And I think this is the weapons are coming also from Azerbaijan and maybe other neighboring countries. And the Americans are trying to destabilize the country for basic few reasons. One, the nuclear deal. Iran is very stubborn in this regard, and they want to gain to become a regional power accepted by the Western world through the nuclear deal. And the Americans don't want to give that to Iran, and especially Israel doesn't want to give that to Iran. The second reason is Iran is becoming closer and closer to by joining BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So it means Iran is slowly but surely moving towards the Eurasian bloc and becoming more politically aligned with Iran, with Russia and China, especially with China. And that presents, in my opinion, a big threat to the American hegemony in the Eurasia. And we all know that whoever controls Eurasia controls the world. So there are three major pillars of Eurasia: Russia, China, and Iran. And if these three countries come closer, that means the American hegemony in the Eurasian region will diminish. And this is what's happening in the past few years. Therefore, the Americans are trying to exclude the Iranians from this equation. And we all know what's the alternative in Iran. If the current government leaves or somehow topples, which is like, in my opinion, impossible. If they couldn't do it in Syria, they would never be able to do it in Iran. And this is not my wishful thinking. This is my analysis, and I am sure about that. They are not unable to overthrow the Iranian current system there in such protests or gunning down some security officers or police, etc. The third reason why the Americans want to destabilize Iran is because Iran, after the war in Ukraine, the Russian offensive on Ukraine, is supplying Russia with weapons, especially drones, kamikaze drones, and also long range missiles. And I think that's a major factor why this turmoil started just at this particular time after the Ukrainian war. And the Americans are very much capable of destabilizing the region. And in my opinion, if the Iranians or any other country in the region they want to avoid such turmoils, I remember one Syrian opposition figure in 2011 said something which is relatively accurate. If we want to stop foreign meddling from enemy countries, we should close the windows that the enemy can jump in your country. And one of these windows is this women rights or the dress code, right? And I'm not sure if the news are accurate or the reports coming from Iran are accurate that there will be no more strict dress code. But I also believe even if Iran abolishes the dress code for women, there will still be a turmoil and problems in Iran because the Americans are determined to turn the tides in Iran in favor of their allies, the people of the Shah, the so-called neoliberals, and you all know if these people come to power, what's going to be the foreign policy of Iran. The third topic is Azerbaijan, Armenia, Karabakh. After the capitulation treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan in 2020, Azerbaijan continues its violation of the Armenian sovereign territories. This year, it invaded the Armenia proper. Armenia proper and still occupies certain posts inside the sovereign Armenian territories. And now Azerbaijan blocks the only road that connects Armenia to Karabakh, Lachin border crossing, and under so-called environmental. So they sent some protesters there. They call them environmental protesters, and they're blocking the road so they can cut the any connection between Armenia and Karabakh. And yesterday, unfortunately, one child died in Nagorno-Karabakh, and because Azerbaijan cuts the gas supplies now to Karabakh, and there was a shortage of electricity, so one child has died. And this is similar situation in Syria. The government prioritized the electricity to the hospitals, and they receive between 10 to 12 hours of electricity per day. The rest is on a generator, and sometimes they don't even have a fuel for a generator, and people are dying because of that. And why is that happening? Because first, the US occupies the Syrian oil and gas fields, and secondly, because Syria cannot import oil from different countries. It only can do it with Iran, because Iran doesn't ask Syria for cash money in order to get the oil. And secondly, because Iran is ready to face the American sanctions or challenge the American sanctions and send oil tankers to Syria. And unfortunately, Russia doesn't do that. Russia asks cash for the fuel or the gas if they want to send to Syria. And secondly, they don't want to be in direct like conflict now with the Americans. And that's one of the reasons why Syrians aren't trying to liberate the eastern shore of the Euphrates, where the Americans have their military posts and they're occupying these oil fields. And I'm not trying to be biased towards Iran or Russia. This is the truth. The only thing that stops the Syrians now from launching military operation in Idlib or in eastern shores of the Euphrates is Russia, because Syria also doesn't want to create a political atmosphere that is unfavorable for Russia, and they know that Russia helped Syria a lot and helped in restoring the territories from the terrorists, and they know that Russia is preoccupied now with Ukraine, so they don't want to create a different atmosphere for Russia or difficult atmosphere for Russia. The fourth thing that happened this year, which I think is very important, the World Cup 2022 in Qatar. And you all know my opinion about Qatar and how much I criticize Qatar for exporting radicalism and jihadism in the region, and their role in destroying Syria. It was undeniable, right? Uh, at the same time, I also think that the World Cup is a political event, and they presented a good image for themselves to the world. They were capable of spending $220 billion for this World Cup, and they presented a good image about themselves. And also, the World Cup proved that lots of Western politicians are racist, and they want to impose their own way of life or their own values on Qatar. Like you know my opinion about Qatar, but at the same time, I cannot swallow the fact that any politician from any other part of the world comes and says how the Qatari people should live or what values should they believe in. And this was especially apparent in the case of the LGBTQ plus rights in Qatar, also on the alcohol ban in the stadiums. They were right on the issue of the migrant workers, which was horrible conditions for these workers, and there lots of them died under harsh conditions. But they have no right at all to dictate or tell other people how to live and what rights they should adopt in their countries. Each country has a different history, different geography, different culture, different religion, and the advance of any society is up to this society and not to other people to come and impose their certain development or progressive ideas on other countries. Lastly, Russia. If I speak about Russia today, I think I will. It will be like forever. But the offensive on Ukraine, in my opinion, is the most important political event that happened since the fall of the Soviet Union. And I think Russia benefited a lot from the Syrian war because Syrian war has stopped the American expansionism in the region, and this was the first setback for the Americans for a very long time, especially after the Iraq and Afghanistan and the Libyan wars. This is the place where the Americans couldn't pursue their foreign policy goals. They were defeated on the military level. However, they're trying to gain more through economic means by the sanctions. So Russia dared to challenge the US expansionism in Syria, and then it gained more experience and um, military experience in Syria, and they were preparing for the Ukrainian war. And we all know that 2014 was a coup d'etat by the CIA in Ukraine, and they installed a puppet government there, and they created an advanced satellite country in on the borders with Russia, and they wanted to create a military threat for Russia, whether through joining Ukraine's joining to NATO or arming the neo Nazis there. This is a very clear script that the Americans follow. They followed in Afghanistan. They supported the craziest Islamists in order to drag the Soviet Union into war in Afghanistan, and they managed to do so, and they were successful. They did similar, I would say, support to the jihadists in Libya, and they succeeded in overthrowing Gaddafi, and they did it in Syria. Who do you think all these multinational jihadists got their monies, training, and expertise? It was the Americans, it is CIA who supported all these groups, whether directly or indirectly. This is an established fact in 2022. And I have posted a long video about this. You can go back on Syriana analysis, 2 videos before this, and watch how the CIA supported the jihadists in Syria, in Afghanistan, and the neo Nazis in Ukraine. I think this war will create a new international system. Russia is not going to lose this war, and this is not my wishful thinking. Again, this is just my observation. Russia is not going to lose this war. Those who are selling these illusions to the Ukrainians that they can win this war, they are just sending more Ukrainians to die. Russia is not going to lose this war because the moment Russia thinks that they're going to lose this war, they're going to use nuclear weapons. And they're very far away from that because they're not losing. And unfortunately, the Ukrainians are paying the highest price, and there are so many, I would say, voices from the media and from the establishment, from the political elites, selling them illusions that they can win this war. They cannot. So they used the Ukrainians as cannon fodders in this war, and the tens of thousands of whether soldiers or civilians died. And at the end of the day, Russia and United States will sit on a table and negotiate. All these people who died, nothing will change. The United States is using this war to advance in Eurasia and in order to create a bridge that comes from Germany, France, Poland, and Ukraine. And it can project its influence over Russia, and it can even create turmoil inside Russia if they control Ukraine. Therefore, Russia, from the Russian point of view, they had to go into this war and this offensive against Ukraine, and they had to create a certain balance of power there. Now, the situation is very tense in Ukraine, but the Russians aren't using the carpet bombing tactics like the United States, like they did in Yugoslavia or in Iraq. If they want to do that, I think Ukraine can lose in a matter of days. But also to not forget that Ukraine is getting so much support, military aid from the European Union and from the United States. And I think the amount of weapons Ukraine received is tremendous. And it's maybe half the budget of Russia. But can the Americans and Europeans continue in this support? That's the question. Because now this year they did, but what about next year? What about the year after? What about the third year, fourth year, fifth year? Are they ready to do that? Because you can see in Europe and in the United States, the inflation, the skyrocketing prices, the economic situation is dire. And from my personal experience, like, this is not a scientific, of course, observation. It's just a personal observation. If I used to go to the supermarket to get groceries, let's say for 50 euros for 3, 4, 5 days, now you pay 80, 90 euros for the same groceries. So the prices are very high. The electricity bill, for example, I used to pay 45 euros. Now I have to pay 75 euros. Not everyone is able to pay that. And the people are starting to talk. At the beginning, yes, everybody was with Ukraine, but now people, when they feel the burden on their shoulders, they aren't as enthusiastic in supporting Ukraine as they used to be previously. So, in my opinion, the time is playing in favor of Russia in this war, and Russia knows that, and that's why they are not interested in an all-out war against Ukraine. They don't need to do that. They know that for the moment, they receive a fresh lifeline from China, from India, from other countries who are buying its gas and oil. Its economy is intact. It's not destroyed like in Ukraine. And there is no high inflation in Russia again. And they have all the gas and the fuel for their economy to sustain, right? So the people who will pay the most are the in Germany, in France, in Poland, in Portugal, etc., and also in Ukraine. So I don't think this war can sustain more than 2 or 3 years. I don't think the Europeans will accept to continue paying tens of billions every year from their tax money, from their own pockets. I think, and let's hope that's the case. Let's hope in 2023 this war comes to an end and the United States and Russia sit on a table and negotiate, because this is the only outcome. Otherwise, what are the people who say Russia will lose think? Uh, do they want direct war between the United States and Russia? I think that's ridiculous for the people who want that. Anyways, now I will come to your questions. So I'm receiving live chat, so questions from live chat, and also there is a section that says here questions. First, I will go to the questions. I received first question from Hamdo15. He says, Kevork, what are your expectations about the situation in Syria? Will there be developments in the coming months on the field and the political level, or will the situation remain stagnant? I think in the next few months there will be development in terms of the rapprochement with Turkey. I think Syria has interest in opening up to Turkey, and also Turkey the same. However, this is all depends on the Turkish commitment uh, to adopt and respect its commitments, because we all know that there is Astana 1 and Astana 2 agreements, and Turkey didn't implement them. Turkey didn't open, for example, the M5 highway that connects Aleppo to Latakia, which they should legally do. And two, they didn't disarm the multinational jihadists there or disarm the hardcore jihadists. So Syria wants a clear schedule from Turkey. When are they going to withdraw from Syria, and when they will disarm these jihadists? If they commit to that, there will be development in this regard. And if it happens, Syria will ask or force the Kurdish militias to withdraw 30 kilometers to the south from the borders from Turkey, and they will accept to receive 1 million refugees at least to come back to the country. And if that happens, this is a very important development, in my opinion. If Syria and Turkey sit on one table, I think the priority will be the US occupation forces, because from the Turkish point of view, the United States is supporting the Kurdish militias, which pose a security threat to Turkey. And from the other side, from the Syrian side, they see that the Americans are occupying their oil fields, and they are also supporting the jihadists in the south and also the Kurdish separatists in the east. So both the Turks and the Syrians, they have a mutual enemy here, in my opinion. And if this happens, the rapprochement happens, I think the Americans will be isolated in the east, and then there will be a big diplomatic effort by Turkey and other Arabic countries in the region to ask the Americans to withdraw from Syria. If the Americans do not withdraw uh, after diplomatic pressure, I think that could be a better time for the Syrians, or even maybe the Turks, to support some of the tribes in eastern shores of the Euphrates to organize an armed resistance against the American occupation forces. But this is all conditioned to a rapprochement with Turkey, between Turkey and Syria. Second question come by Tony Wassouf. When the bad economic situation will be changed in Syria? Only one answer for that: when the Americans withdraw from Syria, because the Americans occupy 50% of Syria's oil fields and they occupy the wheat. Syria cannot reconstruct without money. If you don't extract oil, you cannot sell the oil. If you don't extract the oil, you cannot function or operate your factories. Syria doesn't have energy resources. Even if you create now 100 or 1,000 new factories, how are you going to operate these factories? Reconstruction stops when you have fuel, energy resources. So when the Americans withdraw from Syria, even if they impose sanctions, Syria will be self-sufficient because Syria will have energy and Syria will have food. So let them impose more sanctions if that happens, because Syria will not need to import. It will have the basic necessities for its people to survive. So, yes, the Americans should withdraw, and that's when the economic situation will improve in Syria. If the Americans stay in Syria, I do not see that the situation will improve in Syria. And that's the unfortunate fact that also there are so many so-called Syrian opposition figures in the United States lobbying, and even with the APAC, with the Israeli lobby, to ask the United States to stay in Syria and also to impose more sanctions. So personally, and sorry to say, but when I call them traitors, I mean, what's the definition of a traitor? Like when you work against the interests of your country, you put your hands in the hands of the enemy to work against the interests of your own people. Imagine that when I write on Twitter and share stories from Syria and say, like, there are people in Syria that I share their stories, they are not able to find milk for their newborn babies. And when I post that, because of the sanctions, right? And when I post that on Twitter, there are people from the so-called opposition figures, they come and laugh on this situation. They're happy to see that. So if this is not treason, what is treason? Right? So it's very sad to see them celebrating this destruction of their own country and choking their own people. And when I share these stories, I become like, they call me names, they call me like an Assadist or whatever. I'm sharing the pain of the people, but unfortunately, they don't care. Assad Saud, he is also asking if the rapprochement between Syria and Turkey will have a positive impact. I already answered that question. How Syria will take back Idlib from Turkish fascists? That's a very important question. I think there are only two ways. One is to strike a deal with Turkey and set a schedule, a timeline for Turkey to absorb these groups slowly and disarm the radical jihadists there also slowly. This could be up to 5 years. Syria isn't asking this to be done like in few months. But if Turkey commits itself for, let's say, a 5-year plan to open the highway, at least in Idlib, and to disarm the jihadists, or at least force them to go 20 kilometers away from the highway, and then there will be an approach to slowly swallow these groups. And there will be so many multinational jihadists who will find themselves in a situation that they're no more needed. What are they doing in Syria? They will find some other places to go. And I think if this happens, multinational jihadists will just cross the borders with Turkey and leave to their own countries. The second way is military means, and that's the most difficult part, in my opinion. If Syria does launches a military operation in Idlib, it's a bloodbath, complete bloodbath, because these radical jihadists are very well armed and very well trained. So hopefully Turkey will clean this dirt and not the Syrian army, because if the Syrian army intervenes, you know what's gonna happen. All the international media will focus on it, and they will start saying, "Oh, the Syrian army is killing its own people. They're killing children. They're killing women. They're raping." You know all these stories that happened in the past years. And then they will start saying Assad is using chemical weapons, and the America will come and bomb Syria. So it's a very long story. So better strike a deal with Turkey and absorb these jihadists slowly, and force them to leave this country or make them hopeless. This is the solution. Other than that, it's a long military operation in Idlib. It could take up to 3 4 months, but there will be thousands and thousands of casualties. People think like, war is a crime. If the Syrian army intervenes, of course there will be civilian casualties. Because what do you think this? Where do you think these jihadists live? Like in military camps? They live among the people. They're living among the civilian areas. They live in civilian neighborhoods. So of course there will be civilian casualties. Question: any development happening in Libya? Actually, Charles, this is an important question. I haven't followed this case closely in the past, let's say, few months, where I was focusing more on Ukraine. But I promise you that I will answer you this question, because I'm gonna host soon the former spokesperson of Gaddafi, and he's a spokesperson in 2011 when NATO intervened, Dr. Musa. So I already contacted him. He agreed to do the interview, and I sent him the questions. I'm just waiting for his time to give me certain time so that we can do interview. So I will ask him all these questions for sure. Alain says, "Hi, Kevork, congratulations on your marriage. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to hear your messages, guys, about this. I know it's not a topic you cover usually, but what can you tell us about the situation on Yemen? Greetings from Spain." Actually, the situation in Yemen is now frozen, just like in Syria, and I think the best outcome that all Yemenis should wish for is a direct talk between Saudi Arabia and with the Yemenis, and also with the Iranians. I think the Iranians and the Saudis, because of their proxy wars and proxy conflicts in the region, they have deteriorated the situation in Yemen. Right? I mean, let's not fool ourselves. Of course, the Iranians are supporting the Houthis and the technology and stuff, the drones. You can see it's a clear fingerprint of the events. But at the same time, the Saudis are committing horrendous war crimes there. The Saudis, with the support of with the weapons of the Americans and the Brits, and also from other European countries, they have killed like 400,000 people in Yemen, and it's the worst humanitarian situation in Yemen. I I don't think the Houthis can win like conclusively this war, like they conquer entire Yemen. At the same time, I don't think the Saudis can exclude the Houthis from this situation. So it's a very huge problem in Yemen, and I truly wish that Mohammed bin Salman follows his instinct and he opens ties with Iran. If the Saudis and the Iranians become on good terms, I think half the conflicts in the region will be solved. And people with, I would say, hot-headed people, or there are so many people, they think like there should be a decisive victory. What is decisive victory? Like turning the like overthrowing the regime in Saudi Arabia? Do you think that's going to happen? Or turning the regime in Iran? Do you think that's going to happen? So why don't we accept the fact that these players are strong and deal with this situation? Treat each other respectfully. I mean, the entire world is developing. The entire world is advancing. The entire world is focusing on science, development, factories, manufacturers. Except this region is like, I know there is foreign meddling. I know there is imperialism. I know there is so much problems because of the history of the region with imperialism, occupations, etc. But at the same time, we also have to our responsibility, right? If, let's say, the Americans come and whisper into my ears to fight my neighbor, why would I do that? The Saudis were listening to the Americans. Now they understood, after how many decades of becoming a tool in the hands of the Americans, supporting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. All around the world, they supported this radical jihadism. In Syria, in Libya, they felt just right now that the Americans don't have allies. The United States doesn't have allies. Even its so-called allies in Europe, the United States is trying to subjugate them. The United States is trying to subjugate the European Union and the industrialized Germany. I mean, those are facts. And we can see what's happening, even if they were called conspiracy theories at the beginning. But the results on the ground is quite clear. The United States never respect its allies. They just want followers, not subordinates, satellite countries. This is the truth. So the Saudis understood this, and now with the war in Ukraine, they didn't listen to Biden, which is a good news. Also, the Emirates didn't listen to the Americans. We need more countries to join this camp and be neutral, or don't be subordinate for the Americans, because they are sending you to your death, just like they are doing now with the Ukrainians. This is my opinion. Now I will go, because the section of the questions is over, I will go to live chat and see what questions do I have there. And please let me know also in the comments if you want me to do like a live stream like this once per month, if you want to pose more questions about certain topics and issues that are happening around the world. So I will go to the questions. Carpe Diem says, have you ever had a jihadist in Germany make a serious attempt to take your life? How real is the danger for you in Germany? Actually, this is a very difficult question. Not because I don't know the answer, because I have faced so much problems in Germany since I moved in, and yes, there are very radical people in Germany. Are they jihadists or not? I'm not the one who can assess that, but I can assure you there are so many people who carried arms in Syria or joined the jihadist groups, and now they live in Germany, and they're just living like as refugees or civilians or whatever. I myself found few people just with few clicks on the internet and with their photos in Syria and videos carrying heavy arms and with very radical groups, and they live here. And I'm not safe in Germany. I walk all the time. I feel like I have eyes behind my head. I have to watch. I'm always ready for self defense. I always carry with me electric shocker. Of course, I can defend myself with my hands, but if somebody is carrying a knife, then you have to use other means. And once, twice, three times, four times, so many times I've been subjected to harassment and also attempts to physically assault. And these people are protected by certain political parties in Germany. They have lawyers, although they are on the job center, so they don't work, they don't even pay their taxes, but they have political parties who pay for their lawyers to come after me. So there are political parties in Germany who think that I am a danger to the German democracy and the German society, and these radical people are the friends of the German society. It's a very upside down world, unfortunately. But I think on the long term, people will understand who is the danger and who is the friend to the German society. So Dragon says, hi, why do you think Russia condones recent mischiefs of Aliyev regime? I mean, Aliyev regime in Azerbaijan sends generators to Ukraine, tries to sell gas to Europe, brings Turkey to the Caucasians. Yeah, it's a very important question. Actually, the trade and the energy deals between Russia and Azerbaijan also is very big. And Russia thinks, or the strategy of Russia is, first of all, is to gain Turkey on its side. And you cannot talk about Turkey without Azerbaijan. It's like they call themselves. It's one people in two states. And the policy of these two states is becoming more harmonized. They're becoming more on the same page. And in my opinion, Russia has a long-term strategy into attracting these two countries on its side, and thinks if these two countries join the Russian camp or become neutral, at least they can neutralize their threat on Russia, right? And we know the history of the First World War, the Second World War, and where Turkey positioned itself during these wars. And now Turkey is a major NATO partner, and Russia is trying to bring Turkey on its side. And in this package is also Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan's position in the Caucasus, in a very important position on the Caspian Sea, and also having all these gas revenues. The Russian companies are investing in Azerbaijan to extract oil, gas, etc. So there is a huge economic interest between both sides. And also, Russia is interested in keeping Azerbaijan having good relations with Russia and have a good relations with the European Union. And don't forget, there are also reports that even when Azerbaijan selling their gas to Europe, it's actually Russian companies extracting this gas. Just like the European Union when buys gas from China, which is a Russian gas, and they're buying it from a black market. So it's complicated. I know people would like to see Russia challenging Azerbaijan, especially when it comes to Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. Uh, uh, that's not going to happen. And unfortunately, the Armenians, after the so-called Velvet Revolution or the Color Revolution, they have lost Russia as a strong ally or firm ally. They have lost Russia as a friend. Yeah, it's still an ally, but if you calculate the interests of Russia with Azerbaijan and compare it to Armenia, it's incomparable, right? So Russia is not, I would say, on the side of Azerbaijan, but definitely doesn't want to gain Azerbaijan as an enemy in that important region. What do you, Branila Vasic asks, what do you think about oil prices? Do you think that USA might make a deal with some oil-rich states, or do you think that they won't be able to do that given their recent aggression against them? My friend, the Americans already tried that multiple times with several OPEC plus member states to either increase the production levels and decrease the prices. I mean, the cap or the prices were not like dramatically dropped, but just a little bit. I mean, the main country that can drop the prices of oil is Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia doesn't want to do that. And it's a good news, in my opinion. Mohammed bin Salman is not in good terms with Biden administration. The Democrats overall, they're closer to Qatar and Turkey or the Muslim Brotherhood in the region than to Saudi Arabia. And the Republicans or Trump had a very good relations with MBS, right? So there is this internal issue in the United States itself that MBS doesn't like the Democrats, but at the same time, MBS wants to create or establish a country and invest its oil revenues into a technological sector, into manufacturing, into factories. And you can see so many projects in Saudi Arabia nowadays, especially on the technological level. They are creating cities for um, gaming development. And when I say game is online gaming. So they're creating cities and bringing all the talented people to develop softwares, games for the generation. So Saudi Arabia is trying to prepare itself for the era after the oil, and they don't want to decrease the prices or minimize the prices of the oil. They are they're building their own country. The future they have to take care of, right? So I don't think the Americans are able to force the Saudis to increase the production of oil or decrease the prices of the oil. But if they offer the Saudis a good bargain, that would be a different issue. But the Americans, as I mentioned, they really don't know how to negotiate. They want to force, they want to dictate, and I don't think. I think the time for that has is over. I can see so many influencers, Saudi, Emirati, Bahraini, Kuwaiti, etc. And those are people aligned with the state, very clear. And they are not really making or posting friendly tweets for the United States. Like they feel like we want to be independent. And I think that's the line that Saudi Arabia is pursuing. And I hope they succeed in that because the success of Saudi Arabia in development and getting rid by these radical ideas, values that they were promoting and marketing in the past and spreading in the past decades, it's in the interest of the entire region and the world. You either what's the solution? You either destroy Saudi Arabia completely so that they stop doing it, or they change themselves or change course. I mean, isn't it better for them to change course? They spend tens of billions in Syria to destroy the country. But when MBS came to power, and I'm not a fan of MBS or trying to promote him, but he wanted to change course. And why not let them do it? It will be very good. It will have a good impact on the entire region, even on Iran. Because, in my opinion, Saudi Arabia, as a radical Sunni Salafi country, was also enriching more radical ideas in Iran because these two countries were, because they considered themselves enemy, and they were like, their positions were more becoming stronger with the increase of the radicalism of the other side. So when Saudi Arabia becomes more radical, Iranians were becoming more radical because they want to fight each other. And when this radicalism decreases in Saudi Arabia, I think the laws will be loosed more in Iran, and also um, the religious fundamentalism in Iran will also decrease. And I know that the fundamentalism between quotations in Iran is not comparable to Saudi Arabia, but still, I just don't. I'm a person who believes in civil state. I don't think religious state should have any role in 21st century. This is just my opinion. Kaspar Kasparian, why isn't the Syrian army trying to take back Idlib? Is it a military power issue, or are there other things that are pulling strings? Yes, no, there is no issue with the military power. The Syrian army is now um, even discharging the old soldiers who fought 7, 8, 9 years. There is no imminent threat, I would say, on Damascus or other strategic areas. Idlib has become a regional issue between Syria and Turkey and Russia and the United States more than a military issue. Of course, the Syrian army can launch a military offensive and capture the area, as I mentioned, maybe in 3 months. But the consequences, can Syria tolerate the consequences? More sanctions, maybe foreign intervention bombing Syria, just like they did during the time of Duma, if they accuse Syria again of using chemical weapons. And we all know in this era, they are able to present the lies like facts, right? I mean, when the war started in Syria, I started documenting and watching the videos and taking notes, downloading the videos, etc. And now, when the war started in Ukraine, and you can see how similar the scripts are, and the names can change, the flags can change. So the mainstream media is, of course, very influential and strong, but they're not creative. They're able, but still, they're able to sell the lies like facts. And unfortunately, most people in the Western world are hypnotized. It's mass psychosis. This is an issue I would like to explain. In the Middle East, for example, the state can control the country, the people, the population through security apparatuses, police, army, etc. So direct control by using Jacobian force. If somebody is like really representing a huge threat to the system, they throw him in jail. Something happens to him. Of course, it happens also in the United States and Europe, but mostly um, in democratic countries, the states control the population through practicing through hegemony. They own the media, they own the education, they own all the state institutions, they own everything, and they're circling all this propaganda and 24/7. I'm in 2022. I still meet with people in Germany who think like Putin invaded Syria or Putin used chemical weapons in Syria. It's unbelievable, but the people believe in this stuff. So I think the issue of launching a military operation in Idlib is difficult because all the media will be again against you, UN Security Council meetings, and they will impose more sanctions. So better do it through a rapprochement with Turkey. Military power is not an issue. They have the military power, they have the capabilities, and they have everything. Charles, question as a Zambian. I want to ask what the perception of Africans in general in Syria and Armenia and the international relations between Iran from your perspective. Um, do you mean the Africans living in Syria? Because there is an African community. And to be honest, in the past 2 3 years, I am seeing increasing number of Africans, especially on Twitter. They show support to Russia and the Russian military offensive in Ukraine. They show sympathy with Syria. I think the Africans are and the Latin Americans are people who can understand the conflict in Syria or can they understand the conflict in Palestine or in elsewhere, and they know what like imperialism means, and they know what the colonial behavior or policy means. I think they're the ones who can understand Syria the best, and they have so many friends in Syria. I salute them. I think they also had the free education in Syria. Africans could have been able to come to Syria before the war and get free education. So I'm happy to see also the Africans in the United States who are not buying into this crap of the Democrats with their gender identity politics, these gender ideologies, dividing people on their gender lines and confusing the kids with their genders and all these transitions for minors that they're doing for to change their sex or gender or whatever. I'm seeing lots of Africans are also becoming aligned with the Muslim community in the United States in refusing this. Inhumane, I would call practices. They're trying to like tell the parents in the United States that they don't have any authority over a child who is like 3 years old or 4 years old. If a 4 year old child has a confusion about his identity, they could change his, make a transition, like a transgender or something. And I don't mind transgender operation after 18 years old or 21 years old when somebody is can decide for himself or herself, but not in a very young age. So I'm clearly seeing more people refusing, I would say, this um, deadly ideology that the Democrats are trying to spread all over the world. Kai Makdugal, I wonder what will happen to the Kurds once the US drops them, like they always do. This is a very important thing, my friend. And myself, I have so many contacts with Kurdish people. I love the Kurdish people. Guys, you don't understand how much the Kurdish people are close to the Armenian people. They are very close to us culturally, music, food, everything. We have shared history. But we're trying to warn them that the Americans don't have friends and they will abandon you. They did in Iraq many times. They will do in Syria. And they will be isolated. And they will be like an island surrounded by Turkey, Syria, and even Iraq. And you remember when in Iraq in 2014, when Mosul fell and Sinjar and ISIS was advancing in Kurdish areas, did the Americans came for help for the Kurds? Nobody came for help for the Kurds, for the Yazidis. It was the Iranians who came to help through the Hashd al-Shabi, or what is called Popular Defense Forces or something in Iraq. Um, do you know, Kaspar Kasparian asks, do you know anything about what the Syrian government is trying to improve the economic situation there? Look, first of all, I already mentioned how much the situation is related to the oil fields and to the food basket, right? Because your food basket is in the east, occupied by Russia. Sorry, by the United States. Your energy resources are occupied in the east. But at the same time, the level of corruption in Syria has skyrocketed after the war. The war is an opportunity for warlords to become rich. The war is an opportunity for anyone with I would say, non-patriotic positions to become in positions of power. This the government needed so many people during the war to stay on one leg, right? And now these people who didn't abandon, didn't go out, or didn't take their money and leave, or in the contrary, they made so much money in Syria. They have an influence in Syria. The government isn't able to combat corruption. It's like they're trying to do cosmetic reforms. They aren't able to do that, and we are in a very bad situation. So, as I mentioned, because of the Americans, but at the same time, because we are not able to create solutions, we aren't able to think outside the box. We're not able to find solutions. We're not able to prepare the people for a long-term um, resistance against this situation. The people are losing their temper, and they are right. Nobody wants to fight 11 years in a war so that when he comes back home, he finds his mother, his father, his children cannot find fuel, cannot find medicine, cannot find bread, even if the main reason is the United States. But the government is there to find solutions, and it's not able to find that. And the corruption level is unbearable in Syria, and anyone with some money can do anything, can buy anything, can find any product that is missing in the markets. But the poor, who are over 90% of the people according to the UN, they've smashed. Da, 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 da. So Branislav Vasic asks, what do you think about the economic situation in EU? Will the current gas prices be able to influence EU and force that? I already talked about this, and I think yes, in a year or two they cannot sustain in this proxy war. They cannot finance this war for a long time. The economic situation is, of course, it's not like the economies are crumbling, but the people are increasingly feeling the burden. They're paying more taxes, they're paying more prices for basic necessities, for groceries, for fuel, for gas, etc., for electricity. So, and I think that's not a coincidence. The United States wanted this also, for example, in Germany. And I made an entire video about this. You can check also on Syriana analysis. Just search for Syriana analysis Germany, for example, and how the United States wants to deindustrialize Germany and subjugate Germany and make it an agricultural country again. And this is a NATO strategy since World War II. And blowing up the gas pipelines, for example, from Russia. I mean, anyone with two functioning brain cells knows that the Americans did it. So to stop this project completely and to stop the German Russian economic integration, imagine if Russia and Germany integrate their economies. The most vital threat to the American hegemony in the entire Europe. If Russia supplies energy, gas, and Germany um, makes products, or become like industry becomes very strong. That's the nightmare for the Americans. Why would Germany need NATO and American forces on their soil if this happens? Think about it. If you were together like this. Aaron is asking if you were to gather like a research paper on Russian foreign policy, how would you start? What pages would you visit for information? What research papers? And I mean, it depends what outcome do you want to reach at the end. But I strongly advise to search for Russian think tanks and read their researches and see what the Russians think about their foreign policy. What is their foreign policy goals, purposes around the world? Don't go and read for the Americans. Americans project their ideas on Russia and China and Iran and the Russians, like, they tell you what is their strategic goal in Syria. They tell you what is their strategic goal in Ukraine. They know their interests, right? And they're not going to sell you some illusions about their own policy goals. So it's very important to read what the Russians think about these cases. And there are so many Russian think tanks that you can research on Google. Kevork, do you think that the military option for the Syrian government in the region east of Euphrates is a last resort, or is it basically off the table? I think it's off the table. Hassan Rashid. It's off the table direct military intervention or offensive in the east. I think first is rapprochement with Turkey. Two, isolating the American forces there. Three, practicing diplomatic pressure, asking UN Security Council meetings, making media efforts, etc., etc. Four, organizing a military resistance against the US occupation forces. If all these do not work, then yes, it could be last resort. But we didn't even start from the first option or for the first step yet. Can you add Arabic sub to your channel? Thanks. Hazem, I have added the Arabic subtitles on the last video on Al Qaeda on my Facebook page, on my Facebook profile. Go to my Kevork Almassian Facebook and watch it. Unfortunately, adding subtitles is a very long procedure. Translating, like posting the subtitles with the right time frame. I mean, I'm just one person. I'm working alone. I really can't do all this alone. And if you compare my income with the work I'm doing, I mean, what am I gaining from this YouTube work? I'm really trying to make public service. But in any case, if you want to really support this and make it possible, there are means in the description below. You can become a premium membership, you can become a patron or PayPal, send donations so that I can hire people to make these subtitles. Otherwise, personally alone, it's really so much work. I cannot do that alone. I have a lot of respect for you, Kevork. Thank you so much. Will the American people understand that the president doesn't rule and is not authorized to make war and peace decisions, divide and conquer? Well, actually, my friend, that's a really good point. I mean, if you see the mental welfare of the mental status of Joe Biden, one should ask who's making the decisions. If he isn't able to form two, three sentences in a logical way, then we have to ask who is making the decisions in the United States and if the presidents can change. I think the presidents can have a minor influence in the decision making, but the bureaucracy is so big in the United States, and there are so many lobbies, arm manufacturers, and companies, multinational corporations, etc., who have lots of influence over the decision making in the United States. I believe the final boss in the Syrian situation is SDF. Do you expect a scenario when Syria and Turkey end up fighting them together? I don't want to fight the SDF or any Kurdish militias, to be honest, but they should feel by themselves if there is a rapprochement between Turkey and Syria that they have no chance to win anything in Syria. And they would just probably join the Syrian army or lay down their arms. I don't want to fight the Kurds or shed any blood, anyone in Syria. I just really hope that the rapprochement with Turkey would bring the Kurds into their senses. They don't care. Okay. Name an American president since World War II that didn't drop bombs on civilian population. Since World War II, maybe JFK? Maybe, I don't know. Tell me. I think JFK also dropped bombs, right? I also don't remember, but maybe the last good president of the United States was JFK, who was assassinated, of course, in my opinion, by the CIA. Is there anything that the Syrian government is doing that is somehow improving Syrian? Like they are issuing laws every day. They are subsidizing lots of materials, but as I mentioned, in Syria there is a huge corruption and there is a lack of creativity. Lots of, in my opinion, unqualified people becoming positions of power in ministers, MPs, etc. Sorry, I have never wanted to say this, but sometimes I feel like I know so much more than these officials in Syria. They are detached from the reality, in my opinion. So many of them. How is the life in Syria now? It depends where you live. The economic situation is dire for everyone. Everyone. They are living without electricity, without fuel, etc., etc. But um, relatively safe for ordinary people, I would say, um, in certain areas, Aleppo, Damascus, Homs, for example. Do you think that the future will reserve only more conflict for the Middle East? And do you think if these readjustments of balance will cause more political issue? No, I think the future in the region will be less wars. I'm a little bit optimistic about that. If Saudi Arabia changes course and Emirates changes course and become more closer to Syria and they open channels with Iran, and if Russia emerges victorious from Ukraine, I think the situation will improve in the Middle East, and these countries will also feel free from the American hegemony and from the American dictates, from also the Americans forcing them to launch wars or spread certain ideologies. I think the future is becoming better for the region. Why did you say that people who didn't want to take the experimental medical were selfish? I did say that. I don't. Back then, maybe Charles. Yes, you're correct. A year ago or something, lots of young people that I know died from corona in Syria, and there could be also a very huge possibility because of even in Syria they've just followed the protocol of the WHO, which is they prevent the early treatment or using certain medicine to treat the COVID patients. And that was a very big, in my opinion, mistake by the Syrian government, and it led to the deaths of also lots of people. When I asked, for example, about ivermectin in Syria, nobody knows about it. That this could be also used part of the medication. Nobody, even the pharmacists, even the doctors. So I urged some people to take their vaccine because there were so many people were dying, but it is a very difficult situation. People who are taking the vaccine now after a year or two, some of them are becoming also diseases. Some of my friends, they have heart inflammation. One friend just recently got a problem with his brain and he collapsed. I'm seeing so many problems among young people, unfortunately, because of these experimental jabs. I would never recommend that for young people again, ever again. Do you hate Jews and do you understand most Jews support the Arabic Syrian people? Of course, I don't hate the Jews. I have a very also good friend who's a Syrian Jewish friend. I interviewed him on Syriana analysis. I think the Jewish people have lots of potentials and lots of also fingerprint over humanity. They've been part in lots of findings and discoveries, etc. I only think that the Zionists in Israel and in the United States, they are not making the lives of the people any easy, and especially for the Palestinians. And when we criticize the Zionists because it is an ideology, it's the same way when we criticize the Salafists, which is also an ideology in Islam. So when I criticize the Zionists, doesn't mean I criticize the Jews or I'm attacking them. The same way when I criticize the Salafists, that doesn't mean that I'm attacking Islam. Question, Kevork, congrats, bro. Thank you. Aside from the what is debilitating sanctions currently in place, what other hybrid war measures are NATO preserving to do in Syria and Greater Syria now in the future? I think two means. One of them is the economic warfare, as you mentioned, and the second thing is the fourth generation of asymmetrical warfare, which is by supporting certain guerrilla groups who can conduct guerrilla warfare against certain governments. And you know that these fighters cannot win against the government, but they can inflict huge damage in the infrastructure because the government has to respond, retaliate. So it's like a tete-a-tete, like a ping pong. And this is what happened in Syria. I don't think they have any other ways to infiltrate now the communities in the region. I lost the pace with the questions. So many questions, man. Accounts that are supporters of Russia on Twitter often support Turkish racists in the extremely unfair war between Turks and Kurds. I don't understand. How does Syrians feel about English and how do you Um, how do Syrians view the Iranian revolution? How do they view the Iranian government? I think the pro-government people, they view the Iranian government positively because they helped Syria in its war against the terrorists. The Iranian revolution also is respected in Syria by the pro-government people because it has turned Iran into more like an anti-American, anti-Israeli country, especially when Egypt. Let's remember Egypt when they strike a deal, a peace deal in the 1978 with Israel. So they left the Arab-Israeli conflict, and it was just 1 year later there was a revolution in Iran. And because Syria felt alone, in its conflict against Israel, so Iran becoming a more anti-Israeli country helped Syria, in my opinion, in this regard, in its conflict against Israel. Do you think, yes, more live streams? Okay. Do you think opinion on the American street is moving in a positive direction? Just a small percentage. I think most Americans have no clue what's going on outside their federal state. I'm sorry, but that's what I think. And also, I have a big family in the United States, and I think they're they're very detached from the reality when it comes to politics. If I were you, I would move out of Berlin. Where do you recommend me to move? Give me options. Should Assad trust Erdogan? And it's not a, should Assad trust Erdogan and normalize ties with Turkey? This is not about trust. Assad said in one of the interviews, if the interest of his people is in rapprochement with Turkey, he will feel disgusted shaking hands with Erdogan, but he will do it anyways. And this is what politicians do, and this is what he should do. The interest of the people comes first. You cannot trust him, but you can establish a political condition and a certain a certain deal with the mediation of Russia. So you can create certain guarantees for this deal to be implemented. Without guarantees, Syria is not going to sign on any deal with Turkey. You cannot trust Erdogan, but you can corner him. You can corner him, and you can keep certain cards in your hands that you can help him if he helps you. This is how things should work with Erdogan. If he feels that you cannot help him in certain, like with the say, let's say the refugee crisis or with the Kurds, he's not gonna be on your side. Um, what do you think of the normalization of homosexuality around the Christian world? Why aren't we speaking out? I can only see Orthodox. Look, I have no bad sentiments at all or negative sentiments against homosexual. If somebody is gay or lesbian, it doesn't affect me, you know. If somebody is born like that or decided like that, I don't care. Like, but I also believe at the same time, don't choke me with your ideas, because the issue of homosexuality has become like if you don't promote homosexuality, if you don't go to parades, or if you don't support them in all means possible, then you're I don't know, homophobia or something. No, but sorry, you have your way of life or certain values. It's your life, but don't come and force your ideology on my children or on my people, or just, it's your life, live whatever, however you want, I don't mind, but don't come and tell me you're not going to be civilized until you accept our values, because that's not the case. Did he already talked about possible meeting between? Yes, I already talked about that a few times. If Russia manages to bring Erdogan on their side, will it help Armenia be safer? Armenia only will be safe when um, they understand that their national security comes first, and they build an army and deterrence with Turkey and with Azerbaijan. If they're expecting Russia to support or other countries to support them, then it's a failed state. Every country should first establish a deterrence with the enemy. But with the current government in Armenia, they prioritize, for example, the LGBTQ rights over their national security, which is very sad. The Greens, the Greens is the cringiest party of all time. It's like a budget version of the Democrats. Yes, they are the worst version of the Democrats. The Greens in Germany are like the worst version of the Democrats in the United States. Um, is it very difficult that the negotiation between Kurds and Syrian Republic works? It's not difficult. Syria accepted delegations from the Kurdish SDF few times in Damascus. The Kurds are insisting to have a federalism, and Syria is not going to give them that, because federalism will lead into partition. I also did, by the way, episode about that. If you want to watch, go to Syriana analysis and just click on federalism search, and you will find an interview with, for example, Dr. Jamal Wakim, Professor Jamal Wakim. I spoke about it extensively. It's not impossible at all. It just the Kurds should understand that the Kurds, just like the Armenians, just like the Shiites, just like the Alawites, just like the Sunnis, just like the Yazidis, they're part of the Syrian community. They're not something special alone that they should have one third of Syria, 50% of the energy, and all the wheat. That's not possible. How long do you think the war in Syria will last? $1 million question, my friend. $1 million question. And congratulations for your engagement. I have married last Thursday. Bravo, Kevork. Appreciate your candid answers, Abris. Thank you. How do you view Iraq-Syria relations? Is the SAA working with the MPF fight terrorism? The relations are good with Iraq, but mostly with the MPF. But there is no, like, let's say, daily meetings or coordinations like it used to be in 2015 and 2014 when ISIS was expanding in both countries. But the relations between Iraq, Syria, and Egypt is so important. If these three countries agree on certain headlines, they have so much potential, and that's why they divided the area, right? The French and the Brits. Um, it's a there was a golden chance before Saddam Hussein for I think in 1979 or 80 for Syria and Iraq to make a unity between them. But Saddam Hussein came to power with the support of the CIA at the beginning, and he tarnished that project. But then he turned against CIA, just like lots of these. In 1953, for example, the generals who came to power in Egypt, including Jamal Abdel Nasser, they were supported partly by the United States, but then they turned against the United States. Um, I think, guys, I have answered lots of questions, and I'm just checking if there is a new question that to answer. Okay. Move to Russia. if The last thing is like moving to Russia will be like, oh, you're a Putinist, and now see you move to Russia, etc., etc. But why not? Maybe one day I move to Russia, but I would like to move in a quiet place, not to Moscow. Why is Ukrainian army still standing? Do you think this war prolonged artificially? The Ukrainian army is standing thanks to tens of billions of aid from the United States and European Union. If the aid stops, they will crumble in a matter of time. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers are being trained by the United States, also in Germany. So it's like a lifeline. It's like they're just extending the war, but can the Ukrainian army conquer the territories, like most of the territories that Russia occupied? No. Um, Opie's Home Shop says, "Thank you. I'm a Jewish and anti-Zionist, and I agree with you." And I mean, this is the human thing to do, right? We are at the end of the day, we are the humans of this universe, and I don't understand why we should hate each other based on religion. So, guys, I will try to wrap up this conversation. It was really nice, 1.5 hour with you, and I enjoyed answering to your questions. If you really like to do for me to do live streams more, please comment on this video. Let me see if there is a demand. I really don't mind. I would like to do more live streams with you too. It's really fun to also engage and interact with you, and so many of you follow me for a long time, and also the human connection, right? I'm not someone who likes like oh, I'm the Syrian analysis guy. No, no. Even if you see me, or if you see me in the street, please say hello, send me messages, and we keep in touch. And if we cross path one day, we would definitely have probably coffee or a beer together. So guys, thank you very much for watching, and it was really a pleasure to share my thoughts with you. And if you want to support my independent work, there are so many means in the description below, through Patreon, PayPal, and also premium membership on YouTube. It's a really great help so that I can also continue working at least part-time to bring this content to you, videos, production, subtitles, etc. It's a really long work. People think it's YouTube work is just easy. It's not. I write scripts, I record the video, I edit them, I post them, and then sometimes I add subtitles. So if you want to support my independent work, I would be really happy by that. So we will see you tomorrow. Most probably, I will host Vanessa Billy from Damascus to speak about the humanitarian catastrophe that is happening in Syria if the electricity comes. So she will let me know tomorrow if there is an electricity. We will do like probably 40 minutes chat with her, and I will post the video on Syriana analysis so that she can explain to you the humanitarian situation in Syria. And see you next time.